Good evening, Hawkeye Nation. The Iowa Hawkeyes falling 80-60 on the road in Evanston. I'm Corey Brad here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Before we get to Coach Gary Close, who joins us for post-game action after each and every Iowa men's basketball game this season, I want to give a shout-out to our sponsor, Brad Van Meter and his team down in Des Moines. He has been a big part of the post-game coverage throughout the season. And if you feel you could get better rates on car insurance, on renter's insurance, perhaps even life insurance, give Brad and his team a call at 515-256-6480. That's 515-256-6480 or online at bradvanmeter.com. Brad Van Meter at State Farm in Des Moines, proud sponsor of our postgame coverage here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Let's get to our breakdown. Coach Close joining us from, I'm assuming, sunny South Carolina. The sun is down on the East Coast, but you're enjoying some nice weather, Gary, and although it says Ellen Close on your daughter, I see that. I'll get that changed on my end so everybody knows.
I'm on her computer, so
it's
I don't mind being Ellen. That's fine.
I'll get that changed, Coach. But just give me your initial thoughts. I want to talk about the ejection. We want to talk about. I want to talk about first half shooting, because I do think there's a trend there, and I've asked you this in the past, and we've been kind of slow to announce that as a problem. Where was this game lost? It just never felt like Iowa was in it.
No, they ran into a buzzsaw tonight. I think the announcer said to me it was nine games in a row that Northwestern has lost. So you have that going against you. You have the fact that Northwestern is playing really good basketball. They're playing as well as any team in the Big Ten right now at both ends of the court. They're very efficient. They don't turn the ball over. They play great defense. They're playing at a very, very high level. I mean, they beat Purdue and Indiana in the same week. And so if Iowa didn't know they were heading into playing a very difficult team, they certainly found out tonight that that's exactly what they are.
And folks, just so everybody's aware, our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line is open, 515-635-1601, 515-635-1601. And we'll get to your calls here in a bit. And I do want to keep our calls somewhat concise tonight due to some time constraints. And, of course, this was a lot happened during this game, Gary, and one of which being the ejection of Coach Fran McCaffrey. And I know that's going to be brought up by our callers, so I'll just go ahead and bring it up. It was a bad call. I mean, it probably should have been by definition of the rule. I mean, they showed it on replay. It should have been a 10-second violation. I think we would probably both agree it's a bad time for a technical when the game is already hanging in the balance and you're trying to overcome a double-digit deficit in the second half on the road. What were your thoughts on the ejection of Fran in that second?
Well, the timing was bad. They ran through the possession, in slow motion, and so the officials aren't doing that. Usually, officials 5-second, 10-second calls are a little bit behind the clock, or to some extent. So it wasn't a blatant miss. It was, it might have been a miss, but as we mentioned, you're down 13, I think, or 15. You've just put one of their best players on the bench with his fourth foul, Hawkeyes. You got him in the penalty. There's still a lot of time left. You got a chance to cut into this lead and make it a game, and then you give up 4 free throws and the possession, and the game, for the most part, is over. I bet he would like to have it back. Maybe not, but it was a tough deal and pretty much sealed their fate, although the way Northwestern played tonight, maybe not. Maybe it really didn't matter.
And I agree with you. I do think there is, without question, and I know we come on here and we joke about it at times, but Gary, without question, there's a beef between Courtney Green and Fran McCaffrey. I see it every single game, it feels like. And at some point, I know Jordan Bohannon, I'll just share the tweet that Jordan Bohannon sent out during the game, Gary. And I know this is he's a biased source. I understand that. But let me just read you this tweet from Jordan Bohannon. This was right after the ejection of his former head coach. He says, and I quote, "Courtney Green and Paul Sells continuing to get assigned to Iowa games shows how incompetent Big Ten officiating office is. Pathetic. There's an obvious bias those two officials have towards Fran and Iowa." Does Jordan have a point, Gary?
He might. He knows better than I do in terms of the whole history. It did seem like a pretty quick tee or two tees. I don't know. Obviously don't know what he said, how the whole thing went down. He got tossed pretty fast. So it'd be interesting to see how, he reports it in terms of what happened. But it's just, it's just the timing. And, maybe because it was so quick, it's hard to, go against that. But as we mentioned, for all intents and purposes, that ended the game.
I do want to bring this to your attention. It was brought up, I think, maybe 2 games ago after Iowa's lost to Purdue. And it's easy to understand how a team may struggle shooting on the road at Purdue. And frankly, it's easy to explain how a team may struggle shooting on the road at Northwestern with the way that Wildcat team is playing. And certainly that student section showed up. It's a tough place to play this year. But I'm going to read you, Iowa's, of course, has had now 7 losses in the Big Ten. And I'm going to read you first half field goal percentage for Iowa during those 6 or 7 losses. And let's see if this surprises you. Wisconsin, they shot 37% in the first half. Nebraska, 21% in the first half. Penn State, 32%. 41% against Ohio State, 46 against Michigan State, 29 against Purdue, 34 against Northwestern. Those are awfully low numbers in 5 of the 7 losses for first half field goal percentage, Gary. And I understand there's a direct correlation in all games between shooting and winning or losing. But those just seem oddly low. And I don't remember off the top of my head, without going back and looking at the data from past seasons, it seems like those numbers are substantially lower than in a typical Iowa Hawkeye loss under Fran McCaffrey. Iowa teams typically shoot the ball better, even in losing efforts. Typically, those issues are on the defensive end, but you could argue that in at least 5 of those 7 games, offense was just as big of a problem.
Yeah, and I would venture to guess, Corey, I don't know, but I would venture to guess that a big part of those low percentages was three-point shooting. And I think at times in games, they've gotten a little three-point happy and have not attacked the basket or ran some plays to get people post-ups inside to, draw some fouls, get a basket, get a good shot, that at times they rely on that three a little bit too much. I know their three-point percentage tonight was horrible. I thought the big thing tonight, and then the same thing's going to happen next week against Wisconsin, when you're playing a team like Northwestern, where the number of possessions are going to be a lot lower for 2 reasons. One is they play good defense, so it's hard to break them down and get a good shot, or you take a quick bad shot. And then the second thing is they're very patient on offense for the most part, and so they're testing your ability to play defense for a longer period of time. And I think in both instances, it was a decided advantage for Northwestern. Iowa could not sustain their defense for long possessions and would eventually break down. And I thought on the offensive end, because of the patience that Northwestern showed, they played a little quick in terms of their shot selection. And I think it's a big reason why they shot 3 for 24 from 3, that they never got into a rhythm. They just looked like they rushed right from the beginning. And then, of course, some of it's you fall behind, you want to try to catch up. But what you want to try to do is get a good shot every time down the court and get some stops the other end and whittle the lead down. And they couldn't do that on either end, and that's why it got as out of hand as it did.
You brought up 3-point shooting and how there's likely a correlation. Of course, there always is a correlation because 3-point shooting is part of that total field goal percentage. But I'll read you the first half 3-point shooting percentage of those 7 losses. 27% against Wisconsin when they shot 37% overall, 32% against Nebraska. That'd be the one outlier because they actually shot 21% overall, 32% from 3. 16% from behind the arc in the first half against Penn State, 44% against Ohio State, 22% first half field goal or 3-point percentage against Michigan State, 10% against Purdue, 12% against Northwestern. So that is sort of the name of the game now, though, right, Gary? I mean, you have to shoot threes well to win basketball games in college basketball 2023. Am I right?
Yeah, you do, but you also need some balance. You just can't rely on 3-point shooting every single night because there's going to be some nights it's not going to happen. And that's where you need a guy that can post up. That's where you need a guy to take the ball to the hoop, draw a foul. And Iowa lacks that at times. I will tell you, their double teams were sharp and crisp. They knew exactly when to do it. They had the rotation coming out of it. They rarely got burned. A few times where you can in double teams, you leave a guy open. I thought they were much sharper on the defensive end than Iowa. And I thought their double teams caused some problems. And so there really wasn't any post offense to speak of. And so they kept relying on the 3 and they couldn't make them. And it just got, it just kind of snowballed.
All right. We've got calls piling up. I do want to get to more substance here, but let's go ahead and go to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Who's on the line?
Hey, Corey, I'm horny.
All right. Let's go to Doug. Welcome to the show, Doug.
Why do I always follow that guy?
Because
we're beginning to wonder a little bit.
Yeah. Soft landing.
Okay.
You are the soft landing, Doug.
All right. I think I have my 2 comments and 2 questions here. For my first comment is Chris Collins got to be Big Ten Coach of the Year. When you look at him losing Nance and the other transfer, and I am shocked that they're in second in the Big Ten. And Bo Buie is. I mean, me and my family went to the Northwestern game here. And again, I don't know what the thing is about the home and away thing, and that was going to be one of my questions. But my first comment is Chris Collins is doing an awesome job. And to think that that's like the most wins they've ever had in the Big Ten, and they haven't had a Big Ten championship since Hoover was president, is they deserve a little bit of what the success they were having. But my second point, it goes back to the ejection. I think the 2019 Iowa Hawkeye team was like really good, and 4 games remaining in that. Now, Fran isn't going to get in any trouble for this, will he, Corey?
I don't think so.
I doubt it. Well, we can have a discussion about Iowa's administration another day. If Gary Barta suspends Fran for this, shame on Gary Barta. But I think it was ridiculous. I agree that it was ridiculous for Fran to get tossed at that point. By the way, James in the chat says, in the private chat, he says, Patrick McCaffrey, according to Patrick, all he said to Courtney Green was that was so bad. And other Iowa players have also said that is true.
Again, I agree with Jabo. The thing that happened at Ohio State, that was with Courtney Green too back in 19?
I believe it was, and that was also involving Fran's other son, Connor. Remember, there was a foul that was or wasn't called against, against Connor, I believe, and I think Connor got it. It's funny if the commentator said, "Well, this might be the first time we've ever had 3 technicals on one family." That's not the case, because in that game, I believe Connor got a T, and then Fran got 2, and that was also the same game. That was actually, you know what? I'm not sure on that, Doug, because Steve McJunkins, right? He was actually the guy that Fran went after the game. Remember? He went after him in the tunnel and called him a lying cheater. So that's what caused that. So I don't know that was Courtney Green, but these two have a history. There's no question. And the Iowa players have been very outspoken about how they feel about Courtney Green.
Yeah, I just don't want what happened. I thought, like I told you, sorry, I always am louder than what I want to be on this. Like I told you, I just don't want, we talked about fan phrase. We have 4 games left. I think Wisconsin on the road, Michigan State, Indiana's a hard place to win, but I just don't want what happened in 19 to happen again, and you said that there shouldn't be any problems with Fran, and any disciplinary things. So that's good. I just hope that they can bounce back. We go 3-1 and we get I think a double bye in the Big Ten tournament. At least that's my hope. My question deals with offense and terminology and understanding Iowa's motion offense. When Fran McCaffrey says motion offense, is he saying the same thing as Bobby Knight or Steve Alford are saying? Is motion offense always the same thing? Or why do we look stagnant at times on offense when I think I know what a motion offense is? Why does it look like no one's moving?
Yeah, well, at times, in any offense, including a motion, you'll have people standing around, not cutting hard, things like not screening well. The execution is not great. The motion offense, it's similar. I mean, it's reading and reacting to the defense and setting screens and cutting, and it's it's hard to scout, and therefore it can be hard to defend because there's no set plays, so to speak. But at times it can bog down, and at times it's hard to get quick hitters because you could call plays to get quick hitters if you need them, but other than that, it can be a tough offense to guard, especially teams that have run it for a long time and are comfortable, with their other guys on the court and reading what they're doing. And it's a lot of reading and reacting. So you got to be smart. You got to understand the game, and it takes a little time to develop.
When you are struggling offense, do you go away from your sets and maybe run a play to get someone open, or it just, like I said, and I don't know why our offense looks so bad on the road. When you shoot 5 from, right. I don't know what our 3-point shooting percentage was. It clogs the middle, but guys, sag and stuff like that. But is there anything that they could have been doing to get their offense jump started there?
Yeah, that's a good call. I mean, maybe some play calls. I did not see a whole lot of play calls called, but they don't call a lot of plays to begin with. We had mentioned earlier, I thought they actually started rushing a little bit, and because of the way Northwestern was playing and the fact that they were falling behind, it took some quick, maybe ill-advised shots. Not all of them. I mean, there were some good looks that they did make, but you get into a rut or get into where you're not shooting well. A lot of times that could be the reason why. And then when the open ones come along, they don't go down either, and it just compounds itself. But Northwestern is one of the best defensive teams in the league. They really play good defense. I don't know where they rank in the league. I'm sure they're in the top 3. I thought defensively tonight they were terrific. I mean, they kept the ball contained. They double teamed really well. They rebounded well, so they didn't get a lot of offensive rebounds. They didn't foul much. They, for the most part, they were with the shooters, and so I thought they played a great defensive game.
Yeah, another road game against Wisconsin. Again, I hope they can get one of these 2 road games because, like you said, Corey, we're down 1. We owe Wisconsin, so hopefully
they're also Wisconsin. Here's the deal, Gary knows this. Wisconsin's desperate. Mm-hmm. They're squarely on the bubble right now. And that game means a lot more from a tournament situation for Wisconsin than it does for Iowa. I do believe that I didn't bring this up before, but I think if Iowa had won today, that's it. They would have been in. Mm-hmm. I think they could have lost out if they won today, and they'd be safely in. I still don't think Iowa's safely in. If they lose out, which I'm not saying is going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. But they have difficult games. You brought up Wisconsin on the road, Indiana on the road, Nebraska's playing great right now. If you were to lose out and then lose in the first round of the Big Ten tournament, I think they're on the bubble and have a chance of not making it. With that being said, I think if you win one of these games, they're likely in, especially if you can win at Wisconsin Thursday.
Yeah.
Gary,
well, the advantage of playing Northwestern before you play Wisconsin is they're very similar in terms of how they're going to play. It's going to be a low possession game. They're going to play good defense. They're not going to turn the ball over. So all the things that they needed tonight that they didn't do, they got a chance to redeem themselves in a similar game. Whereas if you go play a team and you score 90 points and the offense comes real easy, and then you turn around and play a team like Northwestern for Wisconsin when the possessions are going to be a lot more difficult, that can tend to be a problem. So hopefully, in that sense, that might help them in the sense that, okay, here's where we fell short in terms of running our offense, and we're going to have to go up against something very similar when they play next week.
I had one last question that just popped in my head.
Sure.
As far as that 10-second call, is it go by the count or is it go by the clock?
Count.
So if the ref is doing this and it's taking more than a second, then because that was clearly at 20, and we were screaming that. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not giving. I don't want to be the Hawkeye that gives Courtney Green any out, but when you have it does go. Sorry, I'm getting loud again. It does go by the officials count, not by the game clock.
Yeah. Now the fans all look at the game clock because that's all they can look at. So, but technically, you'll see the official waving his arm, and he's making the count.
All right, we've got a couple of questions in our chat to get to here in a second. Before we do that, I want to make sure to give a plug to Iowa Smokehouse. They, of course, are sponsoring our content here this evening. And if you haven't checked out their great products, certainly give them a look. Visit iowasmokehouse.com, and you can use that code Hawkeye for 15% off your order. How about that? 15% off your order with the code Hawkeye. And if you spend $50 on their website, you'll get free shipping as well, courtesy of Iowa Smokehouse down in Albia. Yes, an Iowa company sponsoring our segment. What better combination there? Again, iowasmokehouse.com. They've got barbecue sauces, beef jerky, meat sticks, steak bites. It's all great, folks. Tasting is believing. Visit iowasmokehouse.com. All right. We've got a couple of questions in our chat. Let's see if I can get to the first one here, if I can find it. So this is actually a comment from James, and I wanted to ask you about it, Gary, because I do think maybe there's some substance to it. Iowa looks one and done. Really scares me that they can't win or shoot well away from home. And although that's just a comment without necessarily data backing it up, the numbers that I gave you from first half shooting, every one but one of those games were road games, right? Iowa's only lost one conference game at home, and that was that overtime loss to Wisconsin in game 1. So Iowa has been struggling in first halves in their losses, and those have almost all been on the road. And we understand typically for any team, it's harder to shoot on the road, but Iowa didn't shoot great down in Florida on a neutral court either, away from Carver against Clemson or TCU. How much of a concern is it, or Duke for that matter? How much of a concern is it right now, Iowa's inability to shoot on the road?
I don't know. I mean, I think they're obviously a better shooting team than they showed. I guess time will tell. Those numbers are there, and I think you could probably look at almost every team in the league, and those numbers will be similar with maybe a couple of exceptions. It's been a home-dominated Big Ten season for the most part. When you rely on the three, then that's where it gets a little bit more up and down. That's just the nature of that shot. So, and I don't think they're as good an outside shooting team as last year. I think they've lost some players from last year. They could really shoot it. Not that they're bad, but so we'll have to wait and see. It's certainly got your attention. That's for sure.
I will say this: we can compliment Northwestern's backcourt all we want, and they are terrific. Boo Buie and Chase Audige. That tandem might be the most important tandem in this conference. But as it relates to Iowa's backcourt, sometimes we look at that as the weak link. And granted, Iowa's two leading scorers today were Rabracha and Murray. But let's not discount what Ulis and Perkins did, because it looked like that game was slipping out of reach at the end of the first half. Ulis comes up with two big shots, a contested long jumper from 2, and then a 3 that he banked in before the end of the first half. Tony Perkins comes out in the second half. I think he scored 6 straight, got him back in it, and they never were able to get over that hump. But those two guys made some big shots.
They did. Yep, they did. At times they played very well, kept them, as you said, within reach of making a run. But it tailed off, and I just, the way Northwestern played tonight, I think they would have beaten a lot of teams. They were sharp. And like we said, when you've gotten you're beaten by the same team 9 times in a row, that's going to stick in your craw a little bit. So they looked right from the get go that they were they had this game circled on their schedule.
And I want to make clear, I'm not trying to paint a narrative that Iowa's biggest issues are on offense. They're now 149 in the country, according to Ken Palm, in defensive efficiency overall. And I want to say this too, piggybacking on what you said earlier, Gary. Yes, they struggled to shoot the ball in the first half, but frankly, I didn't think they played good defense in the first half. I thought Northwestern missed quite a few shots in that first half, some easier shots.
Right.
They could have easily been up 15, 16, 17, I think, at halftime with the way Iowa shot the ball had they just made the makeables. But Northwestern struggled from the field. I didn't think Iowa's defense was very good in the first half, and I thought it got worse in the second half. This was just a bad performance overall. They gave up 80. And they gave up 80 to a Northwestern team that isn't great offensively. And it's
they probably average in the mid to upper 60s. So they probably scored 13 to 15 points more than they average. And, that's a lot. That's a significant amount.
They scored 43 in the second half. And you're trying to come back from, a 9-point deficit or whatever it was at halftime. Probably can't give up 43.
Yeah, and they shot lights out from 3. I mean, I don't know what they ended up shooting, but it was real high. I'm going to guess
57% from 3 in the second half, and for the game, Northwestern was 50%, 10 of 20.
Yeah, and Iowa makes 3, so you get outscored by 21 points from 3. There's your game.
Absolutely. Let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Let's go to James. Welcome to the show, James.
How you doing? First
hey,
off,
James.
One thing I gotta say, so they still count in college basketball because high school in Iowa they just got a shot clock this year, and they do the 10 seconds going off the shot clock.
Yeah, are you confident in that, Gary? Because I was in agreement with James.
It may have changed. It may have changed since I've been coaching, but when I was coaching, it was the official made the arms walking behind the ball.
Yeah, I didn't know. I was just wondering because I know they just high school just got shot clocks this year, so that rule just came in effect in Iowa. But I didn't know how that worked. But one thing, like I said, obviously, I'm not trying to say they're one and done, but they do scare me on the fact that they just don't seem to play the same. They get out physical. They get physical at home. If somebody plays them physical at home, it seems like they can respond. But if they get out physical on the road, it just seems like they just crumble.
Yeah. Well, They were not very strong tonight, that's for sure. They did not have. I mean, they fell behind 11-3 right from the get-go, and it never got closer than that. I don't think. That's how dominant Northwestern was. So
the one thing that kind of happened too. Sorry.
Excuse me.
But as I say, the student section put our student section to shame. It made our student section look like it was abysmal. I don't know if that's the way it's at, but you can at least hear their student section make an impact. Maybe not impact as much, but you can always hear the student section. You play at home, the student section is not there, which it probably ain't. I don't know how many people are, but I'm saying I don't know if they get it for free or if they got to pay for it, but whatever they're doing is working.
They've got a tiny arena, James.
What?
I said they've got a tiny gym. So that's a big part of it. I mean, they don't know how many students they get in there, but it doesn't take a whole lot to pack that place. James, are you with us? James?
Well,
we lost James. We'll have to try to maybe go back to him later if he gets back. You know what I would do, Gary? Maybe you're going to tell me I'm wrong, and I understand that sometimes threes just don't fall. But if I'm Iowa, I don't care about what happened at Minnesota. I don't think Iowa played very well a week ago anyways, all right, to beat Minnesota, a team that had been getting blown out by 20 to 30 consistently. What I would do if I'm Fran McCaffrey, and I'm not a coach, but this would be my puny little advice. I would pull up tape from a game that took place on, pull up the date here. Let's see here. What's the date? The 8th of January. You know what game that was?
8th of January?
Yes, road game.
Not off the top of my head.
That's at Rutgers. You go back and watch that tape. Go back and watch to see how Iowa played on the road at Rutgers. And I understand when shots are falling, shots are falling. But to James' point, Rutgers, when I think of a physical Big Ten team, they're right up there at the top as far as physicality is concerned and defense. And Iowa went into that gym in a tough place to play and beat Rutgers by double figures. And that's one of just 2 road wins for Iowa this conference season, the other being against a miserable Minnesota team. So I don't know. Is there substance to that? Do you go back and do that, or is that something maybe the coaches do privately? I don't know. Is that
Possibly
or not?
It's it's difficult to games come so quickly to you want to use your time wisely with your team in terms of going through this tape and showing some things, and then showing them tape of Wisconsin, the team they're going to play, but it's not uncommon where maybe look back on where do we play well, and obviously you're going to go back and look at the first Wisconsin game and things like that, and so maybe it's a possibility.
All right, let's go back to James. James,
sorry about that. I was having internet issues. I don't know what's going on.
You're good.
But I didn't know how small the arena was, so I guess maybe it does make an impact in that retrospect. But in general, it's just like you hope they can win. They got a couple of road games. They need to win at least one of them. I feel like if you go 2-1 in the next 3 or whatever, or how many you got left, 3 or 4?
I mean, it depends on what you mean when you say they have to. I mean, what does that mean?
I mean, I feel like you have to win. You have to win one of the road games because
for what? For what?
To be honest with you, for me to get in, and maybe to get even a better seed, because I feel like if you can't win on the road and you only beat Minnesota on the road, who's the worst Big Ten team?
Rutgers. They beat Rutgers on the road. Yeah,
they did beat Rutgers. You're right. Okay. Maybe I don't know.
I'm just saying. I'm not saying you're wrong that maybe the resume doesn't look as pretty as some people think, but Mike DeCourcy's got them as a 6 seed. Yeah, they're not dropping down. They had to drop past the 11 seed, right? They're going to be in if they take care of business against Nebraska and Michigan State. They will be in. Now, I don't know if they're going to do that because Michigan State's tough and Nebraska's rolling.
The thing about Nebraska is at home, so that does give us a really good chance of beating them, just because I feel a lot more confident at home than I do on the road, and I feel like other teams in the country feel like that too. But one thing I heard you say earlier was that, a lot of teams struggle on the road and at home, but I don't think I've ever seen an Iowa team that I feel like struggles this bad on the road and at home splits, where they shoot 10-12% from 3 or less than 20% from 3. But maybe that's because J-Bo will get you a couple, so it doesn't seem that bad because Jerome Bohannon would always get you a couple of threes.
And Keegan Murray.
Like I said,
he's only the leading 3-point rookie shooter.
Yeah, and Keegan Murray doesn't seem like that big of an issue.
Yeah.
So what you've got is 3 or 4 3-point shooters spread out, and that's harder to guard, and you get more open looks. So whereas this team, they're going to make some players prove it before they really guard them, and if they don't prove it, then they're not going to guard them, and that's where it gets to be a little more difficult.
Anything else, James?
And then one more thing. So you think who we have left? Michigan State, Indiana, Wisconsin, Nebraska.
Correct.
Sounds right.
So how many of those losses do you think would be a bad loss? Any of them, Nebraska, maybe just because they're in the bottom, or?
I think you lose to Nebraska at home. That's going to be probably quad 3. I'd have to look at the net rankings. That's a bad loss.
You think everything else would be? I mean, if you do lose everything else, you think it won't be? Indiana, obviously, because they're top 25, so obviously that wouldn't count.
Here's my thing, and I know, Gary, you probably don't care to speculate like I do, but if they beat Nebraska and lose the other 3, I think we're sweating. I think we're nervous at Big Ten tournament time. But I think they're in. Even if they lose every game but Nebraska, as long as they beat Nebraska the last game, that shouldn't matter. Right now, their attitude from a coach's perspective, right, Gary, is let's go beat Wisconsin. Let's flush this. Let's regroup. We're not caring about resume or what's going to happen in 2 weeks. We got to go beat Wisconsin. And I think if they beat Wisconsin, same result as if they had won tonight, they're in. It would take, I don't even know what it would take. I think they're in. They guarantee them to have a 500 conference season with wins against Iowa State. And, of course, they have some of the highest number of quad 1 wins in the country. So they just got to go focus on Wisconsin. They got a couple of days to prepare here. But as Gary said, Wisconsin's tough defensively, just like Northwestern is.
Did Seton Hall beat UConn today? They were up last time I looked. Because if they did, that's another big win for Iowa.
They played them again today. They just played them just play that team 2 nights ago?
It might have been the same game. I don't know. I just saw it on TV earlier. Did they beat them that night though?
No, they lost. No, they didn't play them today. No, they lost the other night by 9. And then Seton Hall may not make the tournament.
It's still not a bad game though. But one more thing I have, then I let you go. Does it seem like Fran sometimes like he'll get more mad at the refs than he does at his players, or is that just me? Because like sometimes it seems like when we're down, he doesn't seem to like make any adjustments, or just like a calm, cool, collected. But then like when the ref makes a bad call, he'll get on him, but it doesn't seem like he gets on the team as much. Or is that just me overthinking stuff?
I don't know. To tell you the truth, I think he does a little bit of both. I've seen him get on the team. The other night he pulled all those young guys because they had one bad possession, and
yeah.
So no, I think he serves up for both groups. I would say that.
All right, enjoy you guys' night, and hopefully we can get
thanks for the
a
call.
better seat at least. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Appreciate the phone call, sir. Yeah, I can appreciate where James is coming from with some of that, and the shooting on the road. Yeah, I mean, here's what I flashed back to today, Gary, and Northwestern is. I find it humorous that the Big Ten crew, and it's a good Big Ten crew. Stephen Bartow's great. I don't even know, was it not Dino Gaudio, Brandon Godden. I think he was the other guy on the call. Those are both great TV guys, but they kept talking about, will they be in the top 25 tomorrow? Yes. First of all, who cares? Who cares if they're in the top 20? Maybe to the fan base it matters because that's a program that's not used to being in the top 25. They were like 2 spots out of the top 25 last week. And what did they do this week? Beat Indiana and Iowa? They will be in the top 25 come tomorrow if that matters to anyone. But it's beside the point. When I was watching that first half today, I thought, we've all been real positive. Iowa had won 9 of the last 12. But this was a perfect illustration of just how fragile college basketball is, because in the one-and-done format, when you get to March Madness, you can have one half like Iowa had today where you shoot 28% and it's over. Even if you shoot 45 to 50%, Iowa's never going to be a Wisconsin or Northwestern defensively, Purdue defensively. They're just never going to play that type of defense under Fran. So if you have a shooting night where you're shooting 25 to 30% in the first half, you're almost guaranteed to lose.
Yeah.
And that's a scary proposition, Gary, because we've seen them do that several times this year. And so if they go to the tournament as let's say they're a 7 seed and, they're playing, I have no idea. They're playing Ole Miss. I don't even know where Ole Miss is, but they just play a random 10 seed. I mean, it just kind of like the Richmond game last year. Nobody expected them to lose that game. They probably win it 9 times out of 10. But man, they've proven that these types of shooting performances are very possible. That is a bit concerning for me because it just I don't recall a team that had this many bad shooting performances in a conference season. Now, maybe I'm just living in.
I tell you what, you'll see a lot of teams that will play Iowa down the road in this league as well as in the tournament that they're going to watch this tape. This was a tape to let you know how to defend Iowa. And now, they did not shoot the ball well, but they had a few open looks, but not many, and they completely shut down for the most part, shut down their inside game, with the double teams and things like that. So now Northwestern's a good defensive team, but they had a terrific game plan and executed it very well.
Let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Vincent, welcome to the show.
Hey, Corey, how you doing? Coach Close, how are you?
Good, Vincent. How are you?
Not too bad, sir. Not too bad. I just first starting off, you just got to give Northwestern a ton of credit. Kind of piggybacking on to what Coach Close was saying. They just really good game plan and then also great execution on Northwestern's part. You got to just give credit where credit is due. I've seen a couple posts in here about fire Fran. No, that's just absurd. Looking at what he's done for the Iowa program over the past 13 years. We just had a rough game, rough outing. The only concern, I guess, I guess I would have is when it comes to tournament play and you get on the road, these are those obstacles that you're going to have to overcome as a team. And I hope that we're able to do that. So hopefully this is a learning experience for Iowa on what kind of atmosphere you're going to have or against a good team on the road. And they learn from that. So just those are my 2 takeaways from from tonight's game. And my concern is, obviously, it looks like we're going to make the tournament as either a 6 to 8 seed. Haven't had a whole lot of luck on the road in the tournament, so that's always concerning. It just seems like we kind of fall short in that area. So hopefully that's something that we can right that ship. But just credit to Northwestern. Good game plan, and well executed.
Well, Vincent, real quick. Yeah, for the people, I didn't even address what you said about the Fire Fran thing. That might be the most living in the moment. I mean, can you imagine? They just won 9 of their last 12 prior to tonight, and they lose at a Northwestern team that's coming off wins against Purdue and Indiana. I mean, my goodness.
Well, the other thing is people don't. How do I say it? They just don't think Northwestern's any good.
They are. God,
they're good. Northwestern's a good basketball. They're in second place. Yep. They just got done beating Indiana and Purdue. They're good. They don't, they may not have the publicity and all of that because they've not been good, but they're hot and they're playing well. And so you didn't lose to a bad team. You lost to a really good team on their court that played well. And so sometimes you just got to give the credit to the other team and look at the tape, find out what you did wrong, and then move on. And if they can beat Wisconsin, then if you can split these 2 games, you'll feel real good about it.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And if you look at Northwestern as a whole, they have I can't think of the coach's name. It's Chris. What is his last name? I forget.
Collins.
He's got just a really good squad. Are they incredibly deep? No, but they've got some good youngsters there. But they have a scary team come tournament time, not only Big Ten tournament, but also NCAA tournament time, because you got an experienced point guard in Boo-Buie. You have an experienced 2 guard and how do you say his name? Audige. Very athletic, can get to the basket. Maybe not the best outside shooter, but boy, he's really improved on that shooting percentage over the last couple of years. They've got a solid post player. I mean, they just have a really solid team, and kind of like you guys are saying, and Coach Close is saying, they just have a good squad. You can't be upset about this loss. I mean, we just got outplayed. It is what it is.
And you could tell they're really coming together. It's a team that
absolutely
is playing well together. Audige wasn't even that good tonight. He was in foul trouble, and I don't even think he got into double figures.
No, he didn't.
But I tell you what they have is the guys know their roles, and they play them. They play them to the best of their ability, and it looks like it's a team that, hey, whatever I got to do to, give us the best chance to win, I'll do it. And they lost 3 good players to the transfer portal, and they're a better team for it. It's quite a story, really.
Hey, Gary, real quick. I know we've said this before, and I think there's truth to it. And here, I'm going to be critical of Fran's defenses for a second. If you have a player who's in a shooting slump, just play him minutes against Iowa, because they'll get out of it. That's just the reality of it. Let's look at just ask Ty Berry. That guy couldn't hit the broadside of a barn before tonight, and he was, Ty Berry for the game ended up making 3 threes, had 16 points, was the second leading scorer on the team. It's just, you leave a guy open, and it seems like Iowa really buys into it seems to me, this is from my perspective on the outside, Gary, and I could be totally wrong, but it seems to me that Iowa's mindset with certain guys is when they're scouted a certain way, I recall the first game against Northwestern, they continued to go under screens on Bowie because Bowie's 3-point shooting wasn't great. I'm assuming that's why they kept doing it. And it seems like they just are stuck with, well, this guy can't shoot. We don't have to worry about it. We're just not going to worry about it. We can't shoot. And then they get burned because they keep leaving guys open. Like, a scouting report is there and it helps you to an extent. But to say you're just not going to close out strong because a guy has a bad history, or you're going to go under screens every time because a guy hasn't proven he can shoot in recent games, that I think that's more lazy than anything, Gary. Am I wrong on that? or do you see the same
No,
thing?
no. I mean, that could happen. I mean, there's always examples of guys that play beyond their their stats or their scouting report, and that's where you've got to learn to make some corrections or alterations on the fly. And if hey, we're going to go under on this guy, but if he makes a couple, hey, that's it. Or maybe this is his night. We're not gonna let 2 turn into 5, and that's where you got to maybe change some things up.
Anything else, Vincent?
One last thing. Just want to kind of get your guys' opinion. When it comes to Ulis and, oh goodness, I'm having a Perkins. Sorry, Ulis and Perkins. At the beginning of the year, I mean, we've all 3 watched the games. I've just seen consistent improvement from those guys, especially in the mid range and ball handling. And they continue to kind of trend in that direction. Are you guys kind of seeing the same thing, just more consistency and not only decision making, but just how they're progressing as players? I just want to give them some kudos. I think over the last probably 8 to 10 games or during their stretch where they've won 9 out of 12, you see them really doing a good job, either with Ulis, at the point, and Tony at the 2. I just think they've done a good job. Have they been, kind of, or had they had lapses as far as scoring in certain stretches? Yeah, but I continue to see improvement from them. Just want to get your guys' take.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think especially from the beginning of the year, they've been a little up and down as has most of the team. But when they've played well, they've really played well. And so no, I agree. I think they both have made good steps as the season's going on.
Vincent, we had, I don't know if you heard it, we had Devin Archie, former Iowa Hawkeye Devin Archie, on the show the other night. I think he's hit it on the head. I asked him about Tony Perkins' improvement because I agree with you, Vincent. But Devin, who coached Tony back in high school, he said, Tony's just got to learn consistency. And I know that's tough, Gary, but he's just so up and down. You just, we see him take over for stretches, and you think about what he did in the second half against Illinois a couple weeks ago. He's got the ability to kill you from the mid-range and in attacking the rim. He's not going to kill you from behind the arc. But it just seems like maybe more of a mental thing, maybe a confidence thing, because when a guy can't maintain that level of consistency, especially when it's not like he's a shooter, right? He's not just a streaky shooter. Is it just a matter of confidence level with him, you think, right now, Gary?
Yeah, and it sounds a little funny, but experience and getting through ups and downs. You can't until you go through it. It's you just never know. And people go through that at different rates. And when you're a guard handling the ball as much as he does, it makes it a little more difficult to do those kind of things too. So he's had a pretty solid season. It's not been perfect, and it's been a little up and down, but he's steadily gotten better through his career, and that's what you're looking for. Consistently, we ask that for everybody. We ask it for teams, and the ones that are the ones that take it to another level, and he's trying to do it as well as the team's trying to do it, and that's what that's what you want to be at the end of March. You want to be playing your best basketball so that it gives you the best chance to advance in tournaments, and that's why these next 4 games are really, really important.
Also, I think with his kind of up and down games, it's also predicated on what kind of defense Iowa's going up against. If they're leaving that mid-range and lane open and he can attack it, I think that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
And some games are just better than others.
No doubt.
Other games, not so much. And even other coaches across the Big Ten have given credit to Tony, saying, look, if we let him inside, he will kill you. I mean, he'll get to the basket, he'll hit his mid-range, and they're not allowing him to do that. So I think some of that's predicated, again, on what kind of defense is being played that day. But it kind of gives me good foresight on what next year will kind of look like for Tony. And I hope it's going to be a fruitful year from him, because that's going to be his senior year, right?
Yep.
Well, he can actually come back 2 more years if he wants.
Oh, there you go. Well.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
So,
gentlemen, thank you. Well, just thank you guys so much for the time. Corey, as always, greatly love the show. Wish I could follow it more in recent weeks, and I have been just due to work schedule. But lastly, Coach Close, I saw the the Chris Strait documentary. Just a great hour-long program in honor of him, and seeing you guys or seeing the former coaches on there. And I didn't realize you were a major factor in recruiting him, or as you said, it wasn't really hard to recruit somebody who wanted,
I was
wanted
a
to come
factor.
there.
I don't know major, but I was a factor.
Right.
I think the University of Iowa was a major factor.
Just great,
Thank you. I
great
appreciate
story.
that. Yeah.
Just me and my wife watched that. Just a great program. So I'll leave you, gentlemen, with that. Thank you so much for the time, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you,
bet.
Vincent. Always appreciate hearing from Vincent, one of our longtime listeners. Doug, appreciate the super chat, Doug. Thank you for taking my call. I just wish people were nicer in the chat. Well, remember, Doug, that not everybody in the chat is a Hawkeye, and I think there are some Nebraska fans in here maybe getting feisty. So don't take things personally in the chat. And if you're in the chat, I'd encourage you to be nice. But you know what, Gary? If people on social media and behind their keyboards and their cell phones were nice, the world would be a much different place.
Yes, it was.
Couple comments here. Tragus 44. I wish Chris Murray would play with the intensity Tony Perkins plays with. We looked terrible inside tonight. Phillip had the ball so many times and hesitated giving Northwestern time to double. I'd given Chris Murray a lot of credit a week ago against Northwestern because he really asserted himself even when he was struggling. It does seem that he still has this problem at times, Gary, maybe succumbing to struggle, if that makes sense, especially on the road where he kind of becomes a bit passive.
Sure. Yeah.
Look necessarily, I think some people would say, well, he lacks a killer instinct. How would you transcribe the issues maybe that Chris is still struggling to overcome to take his game to the next level?
Yeah. I don't know if it's lacking of a killer instinct. Might be a little lack of confidence. Hey, it's hard to go through tough times. He's in a much different role this year. Last year, if that happened, he had a lot more people around him that could pick him up. Now it's not as much. We got the two players that left were terrific players. So he's got a much different role than he did last year. And for the most part, he's handled it real well. Well, you're going to have some slip ups. That's just the whole part of developing as a player. But I would like to see him attack more and get to the free throw line and add that part to his game. He's done it at times, but I think when he's really a handful, he's doing a little bit of both, and we didn't see a whole lot of that tonight.
I want to give a shout out to Iowa Smokehouse. They're sponsoring our coverage here from the Hawkeye of the Storm, our Iowa postgame coverage. If you want a better quality snack for game day or any big event, be sure to check out what Iowa Smokehouse offers at iowasmokehouse.com. They offer a full lineup sure to satisfy you and your family's snacking needs, whether it's their thick and tender cuts of beef jerky, their flavorful meat sticks, or perhaps their steak bites. They also have ketchups and barbecue sauces. You'll never need to look anywhere else. Tasting is believing. Go to iowasmokehouse.com and use the code Hawkeye for 15% off. Tasting is believing with Iowa Smokehouse. All right, let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Let's go to Jeff. Welcome to the show, Jeff. Jeff, are you with us? You're muted, Jeff. Going once, going twice.
The way we played tonight.
How are you guys doing?
Good,
Jeff.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Hey, had a couple questions, I guess, for Coach Close, and this is not necessarily being critical of the referees, but it just seems like, boy, we've had Courtney Green a lot of times this year, and just why is it just a conference that has certain sets of officials? I'm sure it's a hierarchy type of thing, but it seems like there's such a pool out there that and there's obviously a personality conflict between Coach McCaffrey and Courtney Green throughout the season. And, I just hope it doesn't end up costing Coach's job. They lost the Wisconsin game earlier in the year due to McCaffrey's technical fouls. And it's just wondering how coaches evaluate that. How much is that communicated behind the scenes in terms of, assignments and things like that, and maybe trying to avoid some of these conflicts, or maybe it's just Coach McCaffrey and having trouble with all officials. Just let me know your thoughts.
Yeah, that's a good question. as I think we had mentioned earlier on the show, that all the officials are evaluated after every game. Coaches have got the opportunity to, talk to the head of officials and explain some things they didn't agree with and send in tape and things like that. So they're constantly scrutinized. And one of the things you'll be able to evaluate when you go to watch the NCAA tournament in March, see how many Big Ten officials are in that tournament. And usually it's a very high number, and they only pick the quote unquote top ones. And so usually the Big Ten is very well represented. And so, we'll see. A lot of those game assignments are way in advance, and not that they can't be changed, but officials know their schedule weeks in advance as to where they're going, so they can make travel plans, things like that. So, and the top officials usually get the top games. They're not going to put a rookie, inexperienced referee coaching Indiana at Purdue. I mean, they just won't do it. So, they've got to learn got to earn their ropes just like the coaches and players do. So, but they're constantly evaluated, and I think the Big Ten's got a reputation of having some of the best officials in the country. I know most of them want to ref in this league, and I guarantee if you're in talk shows, the SEC and the ACC, they're all complaining about the officials too. So it's a tough deal, but it's kind of the way it is.
Anything else, Jeff?
No, we're good.
All right, Jeff.
Thank you for calling in, Jeff. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Good questions tonight, Gary. Appreciate how engaged people are despite the loss. And I do have a question here in the chat from Timothy. Why don't we ever play Josh O or Mulvey? Seems like big bodies in the lane would have helped for a few minutes. Northwestern's not real big, and those guys aren't really playing unless they are absolutely needed, Gary. I don't really know what those guys give you in a game like this. That's just my opinion. Yeah,
I agree with you. They just haven't, in the limited time they've had it, I'm sure in practice, have shown enough that the coaches feel that they will give them more than what they've already got out there. And you're going to, as a coach, you're going to put the guys out there you think give you the best chance to win. And right now, those two are not in the mix as far as that goes.
All right, let's go back to we've got Tony, we got Ryan on hold. Let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Gary Close. Who's on the line?
Corey, this is Don Patterson. How are you?
Don Patterson.
Hey, Don.
How you doing, Coach?
Gary, how are you?
I'm great. It's good to hear your voice.
It's good to hear yours, too. I just wanted to make a couple of observations. And one thing, as you know, Corey, looking at the 5 teams that had beaten Northwestern, they all won 4 different parameters. Each of those 5 teams won them. Of course, we were one of those teams. And those parameters were overall field goal percentage, 3-point shooting percentage, overall rebounding, total rebounds, and then last but not least assists. All 5 teams beat them in those categories. So obviously that's a pretty good way to play them if you plan to beat them. And as you might imagine, we won one of those 4 parameters tonight. We did win on rebounding, but we failed on the other 3. And the only other comment I was going to make, Corey and Gary, which I think you'll both appreciate, there is a correlation, a parallel between football and basketball. And that's simply this. If you rely on outscoring people, that's a problem, because if you have an off day, whether that be, dropping passes on a football field or missing shots on a court,
exactly,
then the defense is not there to bail you out. So the simple solution, it's not the most sexy solution, but the simple solution is play great defense, and you always have a chance.
Yeah.
And that's something we're able to do in football. And of course, it's not very entertaining to watch the offense struggle in football. and it is a lot of fun to watch our basketball team play. Even if we're a little bit off our game, we typically still win. But tonight on the road, of course, it was a problem, and we just couldn't buy a shot.
And Don, real quick, let me just interject real quick, and Gary, I'll get your thoughts. I do think it's, I don't want to say fitting, but it makes sense based on what you just said. And you're absolutely right. Iowa's losses this year, as we talked about, it came down to lack of three-point shooting more often than not, lack of shooting overall. You go back to the Richmond game last year, I wouldn't blame the defense specifically in that game. And Gary, my thoughts on that are very simple. We may look at Iowa does lose games at times because they are outscored, but Iowa's very efficient offensively. It's hard to be better than them offensively in a game. So that's why Iowa's so good when they score over 80. It's just hard to outscore Iowa. But to Don's point,
go ahead.
I was just saying, to your point, Don, you're going to lose games when your offense does fail you. And then you look at the offense and say, well, that's the problem. Well, no, it's because you're so reliant on the offense, right? Isn't that kind of your point, Don?
Yeah, exactly. And the example in football, if you've got a really explosive offense and you're just simply relying on your ability to outscore people, what happens when you turn the ball over 3 times? And the basketball equivalent, of course, is to get killed on turnovers there too.
Mm-hmm.
Incidentally, we did lose on turnovers tonight. No surprise there. The way the game, the way you viewed the game, you were pretty sure.
And usually, not always, a good defense will get an advantage on a good offense. It doesn't happen all the time, but kind of like good pitching will stop great hitting. You see it in the World Series all the time. And that's usually the case.
I was just going to say, Gary, the other thing that I found was interesting. I do know for a fact our basketball team does talk about when they turn the ball over, they refer to that as a pick six.
Yeah.
And all I'm saying is oftentimes if you turn it over, of course, if it's turned over in the open court, oftentimes it does result in a score on the other end. And I think it's kind of a neat thing that they use the football term. We're not going to have any pick sixes. If we turn the ball over, maybe it's underneath the basket and we can still get back and defend. But those open court turnovers are more painful because invariably they usually show up as baskets on the other end.
What's amazing, Don, is usually when that happens, when you turn the ball over, inevitably the team comes down and scores. They very rarely miss. And so it ends up being a 4-point play, a 5-point play, a 6-point play. And obviously you get a few of those in a game, your chance of winning, especially if you're on the road, are going to be really, really difficult. So we always called it the basketball gods will get you. You turn the ball over, they'll usually nail you at the other end as well. So,
there's all truth to that. I honestly felt, though, in the first half, I'd be curious what your perception was. I felt, even though we couldn't hit the side of a barn in the first half, it seemed, I did feel that our defense was giving us still a chance. We hit the unlikely bank shot at the end of the half, and we're down by 11, and you're thinking, well, thank God we're playing a little better defense tonight, even though Northwestern was shooting it well. At least I felt like we were working hard. We were hustling. We were trying to play good defense because we realized, my gosh, we can't score, so we're going to have to play good defense.
Yeah. I agree with you. I thought the effort was good. In the first half for sure. I thought it was one of those games, and you've been a part of them where you're just not going your way, even though you've got the effort. They had a few breakdowns, but you're going to have that. But Northwestern was just it was just their night in terms of making shots that they don't make as much normally. I thought I was very competitive in the first half for as badly as they shot, and that's why I thought at halftime, they got a chance because the effort was there, and Northwestern played phenomenally. Hopefully they drop off a little bit and we get a little bit better. All of a sudden it's a game, but it didn't happen.
Yeah, I felt that way too, and just as support of the fact that we were playing hard. Yeah, I don't think there's any way we out-rebound them. Both out-rebound them on offensive end and on the defensive end, on both ends. If we weren't really playing with a lot of effort.
No, I agree.
And because let's face it, if they're shooting really well, then it's going to be a little tougher to get defensive rebounds because the ball's in the hoop too often.
Yep.
Exactly. And the fact that we're not shooting well, obviously their position. There's a reason you have more defensive rebounds than offensive rebounds, and if we're not shooting well as an offense, then clearly there's a good chance we're going to be out rebounded. But that tonight did not happen. So I thought that was interesting that we still had an edge on rebounds.
Hey, Don,
We got to get you on this show more often, Don.
Don, Ben says in the chat, he says Donnie P's statistical observations. He loves it. He's trying to take Coach Close's job. Are you trying to take Gary's job here?
I think he deserves
Absolutely
it.
not. I'm going to say
Let's see, Wisconsin the next
maybe
game. You're on.
as much as Gary knows about basketball, and that might be an optimistic assessment on my part. Maybe
I know about a 20th in football, and I know that's optimistic.
Well, Don,
but I do think that there is a parallel there. If you play great defense, then you have a chance, even when you're not shooting well. And the football equivalent, obviously, is when you're turning the ball over. How can you recover from being -3 on turnovers in football unless you play great defense? That's your only chance.
Yeah, no.
And
Super Bowl, it was one turnover.
Football-wise, and the frustration I have is who does not like to see explosive offense? I mean, I was an offensive coach all those years, and to me, that's so much a fun part of the game is watching an offense execute to such a high level that the defense simply has trouble stopping them.
Yeah.
And a good example that we're so familiar with right now would be Kansas City. The Chiefs are just difficult to defend.
Yeah.
And it's great execution on the players' part, but it's also great play calling. And we don't need to get into football play calling tonight. We don't have time for that. But I think that's one reason Kansas City's such a winner is because they have great imagination with how they play offense.
Don, before I let you slide, I know it goes without saying, but having you calling into this show, we always reflect on the difference in where Iowa football is as opposed to Iowa basketball and priorities. We're talking defense versus offense with both programs. It could not be. I would guess there's not a single Power 5 program in the country, maybe not a Division I program in the country with as stark of a difference in, I don't want to say values, but that's what it is, right? Iowa football living and dying off the defense, and Iowa basketball living and dying off the offense. So you both of you coaches know that better than anyone.
Yeah, I do have one question for Gary because, Gary's every bit as much an expert about basketball as I ever thought about being in football. But I know Corey and I have talked about it, Gary, realizing that there are two ends of the court, and it matters a lot how you play defense in basketball too. It always seemed odd to me, and I've mentioned this to Corey, that in football we have coaches that specialize in offense or defense.
Yeah.
And yet in basketball, and Corey has educated me a little bit. Corey, correct me if I'm wrong, you gave the example of Michigan a few years ago. They were very, very good on offense, but they not so good on defense. And the head basketball coach said, I'm going to hire a defensive specialist, and we're going to be better on defense. And that's exactly what they did.
Yeah. That's accurate, isn't it, Gary?
I think you're seeing more and more of it. When I was coaching, it was very little of it at all. Northwestern hired the Coach Lowry, who was a terrific defensive coach at Southern Illinois and a couple other places. And I don't think there's any doubt he's had an impact on how they're playing defense. It's not as structured as football is in terms of, you got a defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator. But you do, at times you will have, staff members that are a little more towards one or the other, but not quite the delineation as you have in football. But it's changing. It's changing more and more.
Yeah.
Because I think people are realizing how important defense is.
You're saying it's a typical thought process for a lot of basketball head coaches now to be sure that someone on staff has really good expertise on the defensive end.
Yeah. I think, and part of it is, the offense has gotten so good with the 3-point shot. It's hard to stop people. And you talk about how hard it is to stop Kansas City, and you've got to be able to be consistent. I agree with that totally.
Well, Coach Patterson, we always enjoy hearing from you, and you're always welcome to call in during any of the segments here.
Well, I've been listening tonight, and it's fun for me just to listen to Gary, to listen to you talk about it because you know so much about what you're talking about.
Oh, I appreciate that. We got them fooled.
And Corey, I've said before, and I'm sure Gary will agree, there's nobody that could be a better moderator than you.
Well,
and I'm sure, Gary, you agree with me in that respect. And
no doubt.
it's what makes for a fun show. You guys know what you're talking about, and you're honest with your assessment. We're such fans of Iowa basketball and Iowa football.
No
Sometimes
doubt.
we have to be grudgingly honest about what our problems are, and
Yeah,
I think that's the best chance we have to solve them is to acknowledge what they are.
exactly. Yeah. Well, we really appreciate you calling in.
Hey, Gary,
Great to hear from you, Don.
And Corey, I'll talk to you soon, I'm sure.
thanks, Donnie.
All right.
Good
Take
night.
care.
Yep, you guys take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Oh, that was fun.
Don's got to keep working on those basketball analytics. He is, man, he is a hard worker.
There's a coach.
Oh man, he's retired, but not really retired. So
He's watching that game just like you were coaching it. That's
he
cool.
absolutely is. All right, we kind of went over time here this evening, folks. So we got to go real quick here because Tony and Ryan have been waiting on hold like the entire show. So we'll go quick here with Tony first to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Welcome, Tony.
You're gonna make me follow up that call?
Yeah.
How can I? Holy man!
I'm sorry I gave Don Patterson more time than I'm going to be able to give you.
Oh no, you can. I'm just saying, man, you're giving me some big shoes to fill. What about like a switcheroo, like where Gary comes in and does a football show one time?
Whoa.
Don does.
I
You
might
don't think
set
you could
me
hit?
back a while.
I
I'm a
did have
good
a question
fan,
for
but
you.
not much of a coach.
What is the travel arrangements for something like when Iowa plays Wisconsin? Is that a bus or is that still a flight or how does that work?
It's probably a bus. By the time you get to the airports and fly and unload everything, it's probably almost as quick to drive it. So I would guess it would be a bus. We always bust in both directions. When I was on either staff, we bust. But I think we flew to Wisconsin one time when I was at Iowa, but usually a bus.
Okay. Another question or statement I guess I had was if we win 3 of the last 4, we're still in really good shape to get that double bye. I don't know if anyone's mentioned that tonight or not, but if we beat Wisconsin, which I know Gary still might not want to hear that because he saw some Wisconsin, but I mean, if we beat Wisconsin and take care of home court, we have a lot of tiebreakers over all those teams that are.
I think Iowa matches up poorly with 3 of their last 4 opponents. That's my opinion.
So
they already lost to Wisconsin. I think they match up poorly with Michigan State simply because of Michigan State's physicality, and traditionally Iowa doesn't play well against Michigan State. And then just to win at Indiana after they blew the 21-point lead at Iowa. I'm not. I know that sounds like I'm being negative. I do think Iowa needs to stay ultra focused on this game on Thursday because I think if they start looking ahead, boy, you could lose 4 straight here in total, and then that game against Nebraska becomes huge on March 5th. Gary, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, it's tough to look ahead. I want to get ready to play Wisconsin next week, but. And I like Iowa at home against anybody. I think, they've proven they've played very well. And the only game they lost, they didn't have Murray and they didn't have Ulis. I think they win that game if they had both of them, so they'd be undefeated. So I think they can get those 2 home games. It's going to be the road games that are going to be difficult. But it's a Wisconsin team that's struggling big time, scoring. And so they're playing them at a time when they're not playing great. And obviously they're going to be playing desperate. But I do think they had advantage playing Northwestern before playing Wisconsin. I think the games are going to be very similar. So I think that'll help them. So hopefully they'll shoot a little bit better. And if they do, then they got a chance.
I brought this up in the past, and this is actually the only basketball I own. But this is the Wilson ball, the NCAA ball. And that's what they use tonight. And Northwestern's usually a Nike school, and I brought this up in the past that those balls are just a little different sometimes.
Well, Northwestern used to use the Under Armour balls. Do they not use those anymore, Gary?
Tonight they made it a point on the broadcast to say they're using the NCAA balls.
Yeah, I don't know. Usually the balls are the balls of the
shoe company.
Yeah. So that's usually the case.
Yeah, but I mean, I hate to say that could predict the future if they were using the NCAA balls tonight and we shot our worst game ever, but it's just something I picked up on that we always have those things that stick in our minds, and the balls that teams use is one of those things that stick in our minds, especially when you see such a poor shooting performance from a team who usually does not shoot that poorly.
But you heard the stats earlier, Tony, that I gave, that it's not been that rare this conference season when they go on the road.
Oh, yeah.
It's about, it's more often than not. They have at least one half where they shoot really badly. So
I want to look to see if the balls do matter, though. Like, I want to go look back and see which schools we've shot poorly with. I know that sounds so menial and trivial. I get it. But I do want to close with, Corey, you have an amazing poker face with accepting Coach Don Patterson's call and not giving it away, because I'm sure you knew that was him on the Iowa Smokehouse. You had to know that was his number on the Iowa Smokehouse.
Wait a minute. How would I have known that?
Well, his phone number doesn't show up. I don't know how it works. I'm sorry. I'm just assuming you got like a cell phone here, and then you're just accepting and like, oh, you didn't.
Wait a minute. You think I'm using you think this call-in line is my personal cell phone number?
I have no idea what it is. I'm sorry. No, I'm just saying,
it's not a personal cell phone. It's a totally different line. So it's not on my phone. No,
And I didn't know how it popped up or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, you have to have an amazing poker face, because here I'm watching it backstage. And you're just like, here we go to the Iowa Smokehouse call-in line, and then you welcome.
I did recognize Don's voice right away. He's got that voice, so I do appreciate him calling in. So
thanks for your time, guys. I'll let you go. Appreciate it.
All right, good to see you.
Cool. All right. LFG, what's with Iowa and slow starts? Am I mischaracterizing the personality of this season's squad? Yeah, I mean, we've talked about that. Todd brings up turnovers, shooting. The turnovers were bad in the first half today, especially just careless passes, Gary.
Very few assists. Yeah, and I attribute it more to Northwestern's defense. I think they were just really, really in tune tonight, and we were a little off.
How about 3 assists to 8 turnovers in that first?
Yeah, that hasn't happened in a long, long time. One of the things we've talked about with Iowa, they're such a high-scoring team, they don't turn the ball over, which is really hard to do, and they deserve a lot of credit for it. Tonight was not the case. They just didn't get a lot of easy baskets. I mean, the Northwestern didn't turn the ball over. They didn't give them any transition. They made everything difficult. Very few. There were some, but very few just defensive breakdowns allowed wide open shots. Just very, very few.
Jack says his eye was up and down style, leading to tired legs and flat jump shots late in the season under Fran.
No.
All right. Jet says, Coach, is it possible that Northwestern is on a streak because they essentially got a break halfway through the season? They're a bit fresher after the COVID pause. I
think it's the other way around. They had their schedule. They might have the toughest schedule in the league. I mean, it's brutal, the schedule they've played. And then after that COVID break, where they probably couldn't practice much, they had like 6 games in 14 days or something, and went 4-2. And I think when they look back on the season, they're going to talk about that was a tough time, and they survived it. And then this past week, when they had back-to-back against against Indiana and Purdue, and won them both, if you don't think they're for real, they are.
And Brandon, since Fran is an offensive-minded coach, is playing better defense a matter of emphasizing it more in practice versus offense, or recruiting players with more of a defensive mentality, or both?
Good question.
You've talked about this before. I think it's probably a little of both. Am I right, Gary?
Most high school kids don't know how to play defense. Now, some of them might have the ability to play defense in terms of quick feet and length and things like that. But they just haven't been schooled enough to be real good defense players. Now there's some every once in a while that'll come through, but for the most part, especially at the level we're talking about, they don't know how to play it. And so it comes down to coaching and teaching and repetition, and that's how you improve.
We'll say the one thing, Gary, that I think, and I've talked about this for Iowa football and their quarterback struggles on offense, skill position issues, and problems developing certain positions. Because Iowa doesn't develop players into defensive stoppers, typically, that's not what they're known for. It's not what Fran's staff is known for doing. I do think with this era of the transfer portal upon us, it's an opportunity to go get somebody who's been developed at another school. Now, I understand the team has to play better defense as a whole, but there is something to be said about recruiting guys out of the portal who have went to another school and been developed on that end, isn't there?
Yeah, a little bit, but probably the first place most schools will start at is what they do on the offensive end, and hope that they can teach them how to play defense. If they have both, then then everybody's going to be after them. But you're not going to go out and get some defensive stopper that's averaging 3 points a game, probably. Unless it's just the perfect fit. You don't need anything else. But it's interesting.
Gold Star Thrifter says his concerns continue to be the same. Sanford, Dix, who will actually shoot the ball when they get open looks. It will spread the defense out early, open up our inside game. Neither of those guys played well. Let's just establish that right now. Both those guys for the game. Dix was 0 for 2 from 3 and just under 11 minutes played. Sanford was 1 of 5, so they were combined 1 of 7 from 3, and a lot of those were good looks. Let me just say this: I shouldn't group those two together. I brought this up before. Somebody's got to teach Peyton Sanford what a good 3-point shot it looks like, Gary. He just launches shots that are not good shots, and so half the time they don't even come off his hand cleanly. Are you seeing what I'm seeing?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I mean, you love his confidence and his guts to put it up. But
absolutely,
shot selection is tough to coach, and it's tough to teach, and you don't want to. It's a fine line between having a good shot and then not ruin his confidence and his go-getiveness. So it's easier than it's more difficult than you would think it would seem.
We're going quick fire on these last few questions because we've gone overtime. Ben says, Coach Close, I know Dr. Tom was an assistant coach, was assigned to scout the opponent. How is the assignment made? Same coach have the assignment for the same team during the year? Common for all teams? How does that work?
Yeah, that's another interesting question. And I'm sure it varies from staff to staff, but normally you'll get assigned a team or teams. You break them up evenly depending on how many assistant coaches scout, and they'll usually keep the same team throughout the year. And in a lot of cases, we'll keep the teams from year to year, unless maybe you run into one where you just like Northwestern. Maybe they changed their scout of Iowa because they had won in 9 games, or you might put a coach on a team that's had some background with them before. Maybe they've coached in the league where the coaches come from. For example, the new Maryland coach, maybe somebody on staff had coached against him when he was at Seton Hall. Things like that. They might make the scout a little more familiar with what you're going up against. But it's a very important part of game preparation. And I thought Northwestern did a really good job of game planning and scouting, and really, from a personnel standpoint, nobody really hurt them on the offensive end. That's how good their defense was, and that's how well their players, took care of the scouting report and executed it.
And Tragus wants to know: did Northwestern do anything differently this game than last game, Gary?
That's a really good question. I'd like to go back and look at both games. Obviously, Iowa scored. The tempo was much quicker at Iowa City, and that's usually the case when you're at home. It's a little easier to get the tempo going at home than it is on the road. But I think Northwestern's improved. I think they're better. And we talk about teams trying to get better as they get towards March. I think from a defensive standpoint, they have gotten a lot better, and they've had to, because their schedule has been really difficult over the last couple of weeks or so.
And Ben says, Coach Close, do you get any inside info from your son? And if you do, you can't share it. So
I'll never tell.
Lomansky says, physical Northwestern play slowed down or cutting to the basket. Did you see that?
Maybe a little. That didn't jump out at me. I thought for the most part, and I might even go back and take a look at the tape. I thought for the most part, Northwestern was just more patient at both ends of the court, and got Iowa rushing at both ends of the court. And the result was that they got better shots than Iowa did and shot a better percentage. That happens on the road. So they got to learn by it and get better quickly because a very similar game is ahead.
And last chat question of the night: How can everyone on the team have a bad shooting night from the outside? I think I can answer that, Gary. Sometimes it is contagious, right?
No doubt.
I think Stephen Pardo even talked about that with Chris Murray. He had a weird air ball from three, and he made a comment. Sometimes when you see your guys missing threes left and right, you start to press, you start to tense up a bit, and that can affect your shot.
And when you rush, just if you're rushing the shot, and it's not in rhythm and it's forced, that's a harder shot to make, especially after you've missed a few before it. Then it all kind of compounds itself. So I think tonight you just got to tip your hat off to Northwestern at both ends of the court. They were just better, and it's not it's not a bad thing, in terms of what Iowa lost to a really good team on their court that played really well, and I think a lot of teams would have gone in there tonight and got beat. Purdue and Indiana just have, so maybe not as bad, but they're playing great right now.
All right, this has got to be quick. We're going to go to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line, and I mean quick, Mr. Ryan. Mr. Ryan, I'm going to reward you.
Ryan is never quick.
Well, but you've waited. Ryan's waited on here for the whole hour. He's been patient, Gary. Ryan.
Gentlemen, I'm going
It
to
looks
be
like he's still asleep.
No. I'm going to be very concise. I got my notes down. Coach Close looks like he's ready to hit the hot tub before it closes. So,
No.
So number one, Coach Close, are you going to be at the game in Madison?
If I can get some tickets.
If you do, are you going to wear Iowa gear, Wisconsin gear, or Eagles gear?
Neutral gear.
Like what you're wearing right now.
Okay. I do have a question for Coach Close and Corey. So the 2-foul rule in the first half, which has been a deal in the Fran era, I felt like okay, Phillip is one thing because you don't really have a whole lot behind him. But when it comes to a guy like Tony Perkins getting 2 fouls, knowing how explosive he can be as the Energizer Bunny, you can maybe let him get his 3rd foul before you bench him and go Josh Dix is kind of what I'm thinking, because Tony got his 2 fouls. He was done in the first half, came out guns a-blazing in the second half. And I kind of thought maybe with guys in that position, you might have been okay with our depth, allowing him to risk number 3 before halftime. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a good question, and it's asked a lot. Some coaches just have a flat-out rule. You get 2, you're going to the bench. And they do it for a couple of reasons. One is, obviously, they don't want to get him into foul trouble. And the second thing is it's sending the message, hey, if you're going to get out there and hack and have a lack of discipline and foul, you're not going to play very much. So don't reach in, don't grab, don't leave your feet, play solid defense, and don't foul. And I think that's, the 2 primary reasons why coaches do that. And it's sound. It's sound. I think the other part that goes into it where coaches that don't do it is, they have a feel for the player and how susceptible they are to fouling and how disciplined they are. A younger player, I don't know if I'm not going to take the risk because they're not They haven't been down the pike enough, and they're going to get their third foul. And you really don't want anybody starting the second half with 3 fouls, because if they get the fourth early in that second half, you really got a problem. And so even coaches that do play players with 2 fouls in the first half, I guarantee you they're getting them out as much as they can, and they're getting them out towards the end of the half so they don't get their third foul. I have never liked sitting somebody if they get 2 quick fouls like in the first 3 or 4 minutes. I hate having them sit for 16 minutes and then 15 minutes at halftime, and then hope that they're going to play well in the second half. I've rarely seen that happen. Where you get into a problem is that, if it's with 8 minutes to go or 10 minutes to go. So coaches have different ways of coaching it. Some just believe, hey, 2, you're going to the bench, and they just don't deviate from it. And I get it. I mean, I can see why they do it. Others are a little more flexible. And so it's like a lot of things. It's just kind of what you believe in.
Thank you for that. I know, Coach, you're going to think, and Corey as well, I'm going to be railing on Crooked Courtney, and you better believe it. He probably saw Keegan sitting back there making millions and thought, hey, I get to screw these guys again. No, we lost fair and square, no question about it. Northwestern catches fire every once or twice every decade, and this is their year. Okay, thank God we kicked their butt on the football field, because they are kind of the cesspool of the Big Ten from an athletic, not academic, but athletic standpoint. What I'm going to say, though, is good officials will tell the coach to get back in the box, and they're going to review the monitor to get the call right. And Coach Collins, to his credit, does not have to get on the treadmill for 1.5 miles tomorrow, because he got his workout in tonight walking past the coach's box. And I'm not a Chris Collins hater one bit. But there is so much video evidence on how Courtney Green and Paul Sleesbag hate Iowa, Courtney Green especially. And if you recall, about 9-10 years ago, when Iowa was right on the cusp of making the tournament, I think it was 2012, TV Teddy Valentine, made sure Tom Izzo won that game 62-60 in that Big Ten tournament final, which bounced us into the NIT. We won 25 games that year. It was 2012 for sure. But
Ryan, you're
one
losing.
thing.
Concise. You said concise and
yeah.
quick.
Well, one thing I'm going to say is, it's about time Gary Barta takes half an hour out of his day, figuring out how to keep the softball women's coach accountable and how to keep Kirk appeased, to call the Big Ten office and make sure, just like he actually did accomplish 10 years ago, to keep TV Ted out of Iowa games. It's about time Courtney Green is out of Iowa games forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Listen, I don't disagree with Ryan, Gary. I don't disagree with Ryan at all. And our last caller, Kyle, you jumped on here late. You got something quick for Coach?
I'm at baseball practice, and so I've just been having to rewind your shows all the time. I've really wanted to call in to try to thread the needle a little bit on Connor McCaffrey. I feel like he has such a love-hate relationship with so many people. They seem to either really dislike him, or they just think he's the MVP of best player they've ever seen. And I found myself sometimes frustrated with him, to be upfront. But I think he reminds me a lot of Nicholas Bear. Remember, Nicholas Bear won that 6th Man of the Year award, And gosh, I loved him, right? Loose balls, did all the little things, just a huge energy player. And then we started him the next year. And I thought that there was a lot of expectations for him to take his game to the next level. And he was either the same player or a little bit worse in that role. And I felt like the same thing with Connor. He came in and I really appreciated his skill set and what he brought. But then it felt like everyone was asking for his role to expand. And I really like him for what he does, that he's just such a smart basketball player, such a great distributor of the ball. He does get beat off the dribble. I think he still really struggles to score the basketball. I know that there's been a lot of conversation regarding his shooting being better this year. Statistically, he's actually the same shooter. He started the year 9 for 15, and since then he's been a 32% 3-point shooter for the entire year. That's his career 3-point percentage. That's Aaron Eulis this year. And he also is a low volume shooter, so you'd actually expect it to be higher. So like he shoots like 3.5 shots a game this year. That's his highest ever. Luka Garza was a 44% 3-point shooter his senior year, and he shot 3.5 a game. J-Bo shot 6 threes a game. Like that's your high volume. And so you would expect those guys to have a little lower percentage. So genuinely, like as a low volume shooter, I would actually expect him to have a higher percentage than 32 kind of over the course of the year. And I guess the last piece I would just say is just that I know a lot is made about how little he turns the ball over, and it is impressive, but I think some context that would be helpful is like he's never asked to create his own shot, nor does he need to. And so he is going to have less opportunities to turn over the ball, unlike a Tony Perkins who, like, man, he's so good around the rim, but it's just a higher, or Joe Toussaint for that matter, another guy who turned the ball over a little bit more, but they were a little bit more dynamic. And so I think I just love so much of what he does bring, but I do get a little frustrated sometimes when people just like think he's this unbelievable all-world player because he can't go get his own shot at the end of the shot clock. And that does have some limitations. And I hope maybe we can just be a little bit more in the middle with him, just to appreciate the great things he does, but also recognize he does, we're 6 years in, he still has limitations offensively.
No, I think you hit the nail right on the head. I think that's Connor to a T. I think you need players like that to be successful.
Sure.
And and so sometimes when you see people improve, you expect more and more and more out of them, and maybe that's just not there. And he's had to play more minutes just because the way the team is right now. They just don't have the depth, and the guys behind him are just not, in his category right now. So I've gone from a guy watching, wondering at times why he was even out on the court, to now going, I'd want him out there about as much as possible, unless some of these younger guys really start to step up. So
for sure,
you have a 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratio with a team that plays as fast as Iowa does. That's remarkable, because you're gonna have turnovers that just pop up on you. I mean, it's right. He throws a lot of penetrating passes, maybe more penetrating passes than anybody on the team, and those will get deflected or dropped if they're not thrown at the right time and in the right way. And I think his shot has struggled of late. He was shooting the ball real well. He's not shooting it as well. He had a couple of shots tonight that weren't even close to going in. So he's in a bit of a slump right now that hopefully he can get out of, because I did think at the beginning of the year that his shot just looked better. It hasn't looked as good of late, for sure.
Appreciate him for who he is, and if he gives you more, heck yeah, man, that's what we want to make a run, right?
Exactly. That's you're playing with house money. Yep.
Kyle, we appreciate you calling as always, sir. And
thanks, Kyle.
Ranger, when you can.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Thanks, sir. All right, folks. Again, thank you to everybody, and Gary, appreciate you hanging out a little bit longer. We had more interaction today than I anticipated. Want to give a final thank you to Brad Van Meter and his team down at State Farm. They've been in business for well over 20 years, actually coming up on their 25-year anniversary, and they'll get you great rates and great service on the major insurance needs in your life: auto insurance, home insurance, renter's insurance, or maybe even business/life life insurance? 515-256-6480 is the number to call to get in contact with Brad and his team. 515-256-6480 or online at bradvanmeter.com. Iowa, Wisconsin this coming Wednesday, 8 p.m. Gary, final thoughts on the Badgers?
Well, that's a team that's struggling. I don't think they've won 2 in a row since the beginning of January, and they've lost a lot of games at home, which they never do. I think they've lost 5 games at home, and so it's a team that is beatable. As you mentioned, they're desperate. So I think the effort will be there. It's going to be, it's going to be the execution. And it's going to, Iowa's going to have to obviously shoot better. I mean, and you're going against a real good defensive team. So they got their hands full, but it's a winnable game. I think probably more so than it's ever been with how Wisconsin is struggling. I think if Iowa can play well and shoot well, they got a chance to beat them.
I was considering going up for that game. The weather looks a little bit iffy. And boy, I traveled down for the Ohio State game on Wednesday, and it was a bear trying to get home. So not sure if I'll be at the game up in Madison, but regardless, we'll be here for post-game coverage following Iowa-Wisconsin this Wednesday. If you're interested in donating to the show, you can find information to do so in the description below, and all of our sponsors can be found there as well. Coach Close, for taking the extra time this evening. I greatly appreciate it. I know a lot of people enjoyed this. Enjoy your trip. Enjoy your time away from the cold, and we'll talk to you when you get back.
All right. Sounds good, Corey. Thanks.
All right. For Coach Gary Close, I'm Corey Brad here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. The Iowa Hawkeyes falling on the road tonight, 80-60 to the Northwestern Wildcats. They'll bounce back with a road contest against the Wisconsin Badgers this Wednesday, 8 p.m. Central Time on BTN, of course, to be followed by Iowa postgame with Coach Gary Close right here. For Coach Gary Close, I'm Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Have a great night, folks. Stay safe.